I was trying to call her.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending. We're going to get the show on the road and make sure you guys can get out of here at a decent time. My name is Nate Carlson. I'm the Economic Development Coordinator for the City of Northfield. This afternoon, I am honored to introduce Mr. Joe Micozzi and the organization Urban 3. The Northfield Economic Development Authority has sponsored this event and has commissioned this work. This lecture seeks to change the way people think about the cost of development sprawl, and the value of land by addressing planning, zoning, placemaking, and capital improvement planning. Land use economics is an effective tool to understand ways a community can proactively manage growth. It is also a fiscally smart way to use land more wisely. The goal for Urban 3's lecture is to change the way people think about the cost of development sprawl and the value of land. A little bit about Joe. Joe is an urban planner, imagining new ways to think about and visualize land use, urban design, and economics. Joe founded Urban 3 to explain and visualize market dynamics created by tax and land use policies. Urban 3's work establishes new conversations across multiple professional sectors, policymakers, and the public to creatively address the challenges of urbanization. Urban 3's extensive studies have ranged geographically from over 30 states, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. The Northfield EDA has commissioned this work to provide community members with an alternative analysis on Northfield's current land use and tax makeup. The northwest area of Northfield was also taken into consideration as part of the greater analysis. The EDA hopes that you find this presentation insightful and entertaining. Without further ado, I'll let Joe take it away.
That's our high-tech introduction right there. So I recognize some of the faces from last night. Thank you all for having me here, and thanks Northfield for hiring us to look at these analytics. We had done a project in Minneapolis before here. This cable out of the way. It's kind of our introduction to you all. But first I'm going to tell a little story about where I'm from, in Asheville, North Carolina. And I want to put a lesson up front. The lesson that I typically give to citizens about their own city, the easiest metaphor I can come up with is a metaphor about myself and the way that I grew up. So this is how I started my life. I have a DNA inside me. This is my trajectory, right? So I'll pop up whether I like it or not. The thing that I find with people is that they have a hard time seeing their community outside the context of itself. So you have to find a way that what's Northfield going to be when it grows up? What's Faribault going to be when it grows up? What are these places? What model do you have? There are models out there that you can learn from. And like I learned from this guy, my dad. And I'm genetically Italian. You can see that from my name and how much I'll wave my hands around when I talk. But we also have a genetic predisposition to heart disease in my family. So I have to watch what I eat, I have to exercise, I have to do all of those things because my dad had a 7 bypass heart surgery. What do you call that, a septuple? And so it's something I have to deal with. And like it or not, that's my genetic material. So you all have that. You're essentially a college town that has a high density of students as your economic engine for your community. You're fairly isolated, and you're in a slow growth part of the country. So how do you deal with that? Who's your model? What college towns are you looking at? Do you have a peer group, somebody that's been down that road maybe 100 years before you in Maine or something? It's what are you looking at? So I'm going to give you a lot of stuff, but at the end of this presentation, I just want you to think about this when you leave here, if you have a model of where you're going to be. So I'm from Asheville. Folks been to Asheville? You know Asheville? Asheville's in about an hour or 4 hours northeast of Atlanta. It's up in the mountains of North Carolina. Blue Ridge Parkway, Smoky Mountains, a beautiful area. We have bluegrass music. We're 90,000 people. We have 40 breweries. It's like 2,000 people per brewery if you want to do the math on that. sorry, clickers clicked off. And like any quirky little mountain town, we have men dressed as nuns on tall bikes that eat fire. It's your typical little place, right? Asheville didn't start this way. It actually started this way. This is a shot of Asheville in the late 1800s. 15 years after this picture was taken, this is what became Asheville. So we essentially exploded once the train lines came to Asheville. We like to say the 3 T's made Asheville: trains, tourism, and tuberculosis. So there's a lot of Northeastern residents that were coming down to Asheville for the clean mountain air. We had the second streetcar line in the entire country. Presidents came to visit. Presidents still visit. We're probably not going to get the current president, but we had Obama 3 times. And during the 1920s, we were growing at 20% in population every year of the decade. Asheville became the second largest city in North Carolina at that period. The only city that was bigger than Asheville was Winston-Salem. So let that wash over you for a second. We were bigger than Charlotte, Raleigh, Durham, Wilmington. In that process, we achieved the highest debt per capita of the entire United States. We were number 1 in debt. And when the Depression hit and our books were audited, we thought we had $5 million in the bank. It turned out we had $18,000 in the bank. Little clerical error there. It is the South, right? So this entire city council was indicted and the mayor committed suicide soon thereafter. We call that leadership in Asheville. We essentially fell on our face. So we just hit the Depression really hard and really solid. Thomas Wolfe, who's a famous American author, had this to say about Asheville. Asheville has squandered fabulous sums. They've flung away the earnings of a lifetime. They've mortgaged those of a generation to come. They have ruined a city, and in doing so, they've ruined themselves, their children, and their children's children. That's a heck of a thing to write in a book, right? Particularly about the South. You generally don't name names like this. You don't speak openly about your problems. He was threatened. His family was threatened. His second book was called You Can't Go Home Again, for obvious reasons. This is the truth. And in a way, he nailed it. Asheville would take generations to deal with this. When the New Deal program came out, a lot of towns that had tremendous amounts of debt had their debt cleaned through basically a federal transfer. Asheville chose not to take the money. They said, we took the money out, we're going to pay it back. It's our debt. It took us until 1976 to pay off the debt. This is the newspaper headline, the newspaper date. You can tell it's a big deal. We've got these 3 guys burning the last bond. Here's Miss Asheville with her tiara. They teleprompter in Billy Graham. When Billy shows up, it's a big deal. And here we are paying off our debt. But check this out. It's the 3rd headline in the paper that day. It's not even the 1st headline. You'd think that we'd be proud of this, 50 years of hanging on to this stuff. And here we are with something about abortion and somebody dying in a prison fire. That's not even our county. McDowell County is 2 counties over. That's how embarrassed we were about this debt. But when we got out of debt, we started doing what other American cities did. We built a highway through the north side of downtown, which became the Crosstown Expressway, and which is I-240. Here's City Hall and the county building right there. And the coup de grace is when we blew the mountain open and made Bowcatcher Cut. I love that they just ripped the mountain open. I love that it's on a postcard. Isn't that awesome? Incidentally, the community fought DOT and tried to get a tunnel. And DOT's like, we don't understand how to do a tunnel. And everybody's like, there's a tunnel right there. Won't that transfer? On the other side of the cut, the mall happened and our downtown died. These are shots from the 80s and 90s. This wasn't too long ago. Anybody that showed up in Asheville and tried to do anything in the downtown was met by this choir of citizens. That's not who we are. We're not Charleston. We're not Chicago. We're not a city. We're rural mountain people. This is who we are, right? This attitude of what they thought they were without thinking about the data of what they were. So I went to work for this guy's company, Julian Price, inherited a tremendous amount of money. He was a resident of Asheville. He lived downtown. He had $15 million of inheritance, and he put it into a for-profit real estate development company. So our job was to use that wealth as a revolving fund. 75% of that money went into sticks and bricks. We fixed buildings. And we reserved 25% to seed businesses. So we work with local entrepreneurs to start the first vegetarian restaurant, a nightclub, Latin restaurants, getting some things going in our downtown because it was dead as a doornail. Ultimately, it was about providing housing for people in the downtown or giving them that opportunity. So this is one of our buildings before and after. So that building was hiding back there behind that screen that the community just kind of like walked away from, but here it is. This is the old Asheville Hotel. We converted these into 400 to 500 square foot apartments. We were told by the banks this would never work. There's no market for that. what I usually do with people is like, okay, so would you all live in a 400 to 500 square foot apartment? Show of hands. Got like one hand. Let me change the question. Who in this room has lived in a 400 to 500 square foot apartment? That was our marketing survey. You know, rather than thinking about what we are, we thought about what our city is. We're 90,000 people. Surely there's 24 people that are new to town, recently graduated, recently divorced. They want to downsize. Maybe they just like living in downtown. This has been a home run. We've been 99% leased up ever since. And again, thinking about what we are as a city, having that model in mind that we're going to grow as a city and not as what we think we are. So there's data there. It's kind of fun to be doing this on this campus because this is a quantitative analysis school. They pride in that. So this is about the data that's out there in cities. So here's our downtown. We're a $15 million investor in a downtown that's worth what? So our downtown was worth $100 million in 1991. And the value of our downtown grew. Now here's what's interesting. We didn't get a new building in downtown Asheville until 2008. So this is all the value of historic preservation. That value was sitting there. All those upper stories weren't being used. And once you start uncorking them and getting them active, you grow your value of your community. So that's the wealth that we're just sitting on. Now the city primed the pump. The city did some streetscape projects. They did some parking decks. They made that initial investment. That's what drew people like Julian and Roger McGuire. There were several investors that came in after. But the city started in the 80s, in the early 1990s. And here they are, they did streetscape projects, beautification projects, about $26 million. These are actual campaign ads from this guy. His name is Chris Peterson. Chris was running for council, and here he is chiding these investments. $26 million. This poor guy's crying. He's got this shackled to these council decisions. Downtown development for bureaucrats instead of water, sewer, streets for our citizens. This guy's crying too. Okay, $26 million is a lot of money. I don't have $26 million bucks. But let's do some math here. If y'all invest $26 million on a $100 million asset, and that asset grows to $500 million, is investing 26 and yielding $430 million of private sector investment, is that a good return on investment?
Yes.
Yeah. Why do we listen to Chris? There's data, right? It's not going to stop Chris. Chris now has a website with like fire and brimstone. This is the mayor right here. I asked the mayor, I'm like, is that a liquor drink? She goes, it should be. He's going to go this way. He misspelled charlatans too, by the way, which is kind of funny. But anyway, what I've experienced in Chris, what I've experienced in my community is, and I've experienced in a lot of communities, if you have a loss of civics, we don't have an honest conversation about what we're all doing collectively. This is a kid's book that I found in a garage sale. The city, the town, and the country. We have the city, the town, and the country. This is the teacher's guide, so y'all are the teacher. You're going to work with third graders. It's a third grade textbook from 1959. Some of you may have seen this book before in your life. In kindergarten, you learn about your house. First grade, the school. Second grade, the neighborhood. Third grade, you learn about regional planning. Don't do that. In the book, it says things like this. So for you, the teacher, how to deal with your third graders, it gives you this prep about civics. While patterns vary from state to state, counties are responsible for education, library, health, welfare, etc. In studying the functions performed by your county, you'll no doubt find there's a duplication of services and overlapping of jurisdictions and a lack of coordination between your county and local communities within it. Do y'all have a good coordination with Rice County about downtown? No. We just don't have these conversations together. This is a problem with a lot of places. Here's the lesson plan. It's like one of these Dick and Jane kind of books. A new factory gets built. There's even more families that come to town. So in the picture, you can see what's going on. I mean, it's painfully white. It's also misogynistic. The girls are shut down the hallway for some reason. But in blue, this is what you ask your third graders. Give 4 good reasons for building a new school. And what do your third graders talk about? Everybody should have a desk, maybe get another teacher, need, right? We have need for stuff. On the right, you read about Mr. Canfield, who lived next door to the Allens. He didn't want a new school. He says, our taxes are too high now. If we build a new school, we'll need more teachers and everything else, and we'll have to pay still higher taxes. That is indeed true. So you ask your third graders about taxation. Why would some people have to pay higher taxes if a new school are built, and why are some people against paying higher taxes? Now, we're all aware of this. We see this now, particularly nationally. We've staked out our territory philosophically about which page we're going to be on. And we've fight each other without realizing that we actually have some common interests, right? It's a civic organization. There's need, and we have to pay for things. So I love this. Remember, too, that many children, whether urban and rural, regardless of region, are tragically limited in their knowledge of their world, and their world is largely the space in which they live and operate. So for those of you that have served on a planning board or been on council or been a mayor, you see this. You talk with folks, and you find that they don't understand all the complexity of what it's like to run a city or a county. It's all about, I need a parking space. I can't park downtown. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, let's just go ahead and like knock down 4 houses or buildings so you can have a parking space. It's like, really, this is what it's about. So for me, a city is a finite boundary of land that has to be managed. Our city, actually our state legislature made it illegal for my city to annex land until December 26, 2026. Thank you, state legislature. It's all right. But so those acres of land are all that we have. So how that business operates, however, if we're a $13 billion real estate development company, what's my city? So if you look up the word incorporate in Oxford Dictionary, it says incorporate, to constitute a company, a city, or other organization as a legal corporation. There's very little difference between our corporation and our city other than our ownership structure. But other than that, it's incorporated. We both have charters, we both have legal documents, we both have cash flows. And it's not just your city, it's your county, it's your state, it's your country. Joe Biden said this on the Stephen Colbert Show. The United States is the largest corporation in the world. I'm such a nerd at midnight, I'm looking this up, so if there's any attorneys in the room, that's the US code that lists us as a federal corporation. It doesn't say we're a capitalistic corporation, it says we're a corporation like a social corporation. That's how we have to operate. Legally, the construct of our government is we're incorporated, like it or not. So if my city were liquidated and put into a stock market, if we were to say what's the stock market value of Asheville, we're $13 billion of taxable value. So my sharehold in my corporation grows to a $13 billion organization. I have a little piece of that, right? So at $13 billion, my city would be 6 times the value of Ted Turner. Does Ted Turner wake up every day and just look at Facebook and that's how he's going to make his decision who's complaining today? Of course not. He's looking at data on how this place operates. So the way that I try to frame buildings, our action within a community, the best parallel I can come up with is thinking of farms. If anybody knows a farmer, and you talk to a farmer, that farmer's always talking about economics. They're talking about crop yield per acre, water per acre, how much it costs for fertilizer, all that stuff. And it's an economic model before they tilt the soil. And you see this as you drive around outside your community. You see farm fields that just aren't being worked because there's no economic reason to do that. So if we go back to, let's take this crop here. This is a building that we rehabbed. We made retail, office, and residential. It's an old JCPenney's building. This is the streetscape that the city did. So thank you, city. Thank you, city, for the garbage can, the bike rack, 2 benches, and a street tree. We didn't pay for that. You did. So that's our subsidy at our front door, according to Chris, right? Okay. We took the taxable value from $300,000 to $11 million. So the taxes y'all get, it's your money. Your taxes just grew by 3,500%. Anybody have a 401k plan or a bond that grows by that? No. So rather than hate on us, how about a thank you card? We just grew your money. And people are like, Joe, that's cool and everything, but this Walmart over here is $20 million. Fair enough. That's double our value. That is indeed true. But it's not a fair comparison. Because when you look at the amount of portion of my corporation that they take up, this takes up 0.2 acres, this takes up 34 acres of my corporation. So using the total gross number is an unfair comparison. Let's break it down to a per acre basis so it's apples to apples, right? So this is our tax yield per acre versus their tax yield per acre. We're paying what? $634,000 an acre in property taxes versus their $6,500. What would you rather have as a cash flow in your community? Retail taxes. We're paying double the retail taxes per acre than they are. Who would have thought that a little furniture store is twice as productive as Walmart? It is. Residents. We've got 9 units of residence per acre versus their 0. Could y'all imagine if I showed up and I was proposing a 90 unit an acre residential mixed use building in your downtown? Like, what train would you send me out of town on? Is that bad? that destroy the quality of life of your community to have that? Most people would kill for it. Jobs, we got a lot of jobs in our building. We've got 74 jobs per acre in our building in the office and the residential or the retail versus their 6. So you find we just get more stuff in less space. For tens of thousands of years, we built cities this way as a genetic way that we built our communities, and we've just bifurcated that process. We don't think that way anymore. Now, I was presenting this in Colorado. I was like, let me make it real easy for you people in Colorado. If you could grow something, what would you grow? Weed or marijuana? And they got the joke. So sometimes people are like, Joe, what's your problem? Why do you hate Walmart? And if that's what you're thinking, you're missing the point. I presented at the International Association of Tax Assessing Officers conference. Is there a tax assessor in the room? Any assessors? Could you all imagine hanging out with 3,000 assessors? It makes a planning conference feel like Burning Man by comparison. It's like the Squares conference. They're cool. They're all mathletes and everything. But it's not exactly like a party crowd. But anyway, this guy presented. He was the keynote speaker at 8 in the morning. Mr. Terrell's doing this presentation with spreadsheet after spreadsheet on how cheap his buildings are. I'm in the back of the room drinking my coffee going, this is brilliant. This guy's getting all of his property taxes lowered in one meeting. The assessors are agnostic, right? If you're building a junky building, you pay low taxes. There's no more value there than what's put on the dirt. So let me make it easy for you. Our tax system rewards me for disinvesting in your community. Period. The crappier the building, the lower the taxes. So I'm watching this all go down, and I'm like trained as an architect, so I have a little bit of an issue with this. So I went up to the microphone and I asked Mr. Terrell, I said, what's the useful life of one of your buildings? And he immediately barked back, quite honestly, 15 years, maybe 20. We designed that building to depreciate it down as quick as possible, build another one and start the depreciation so we can maximize the depreciation. And we don't care about the buildings, we're more about the distribution system of the goods. The buildings are throwaway for us. That's it. From the mouth of babes. Don't hate the player, hate the game, understand the game. Understand how our tax system works. And it's your community, it's your corporation. Is that a good investment for you? Is it good to have an investment that's like the lifespan of a cat? True call. Release more in the passing of a cat. Y'all can laugh about this. I'm trying to make some jokes here. It is kind of depressing, but it's, you know, this is your community. Now, in my community, my county residents have a hostility toward my city. I've got 2 voters out in the county for every 1 voter in the city. And this is the reason why our state is so punitive on us. Our state legislator called us a cesspool of sin, which was super awesome. So we're like, all right, well, here's what I pay on average, the average city resident of Asheville, who is also a Buncombe County resident. If y'all want to know where the word, you don't know bunk came from, boom. That's my county. Anyway, this is the average county tax paying resident out in the county. So my brothers and sisters who live out there, it's like, y'all, we pay more taxes to your corporation than you do. So rather than hate on us, how about a thank you card once in a while? So this is residential, here's commercial. Every state that I've been to taxes commercial more than residential, and here's our mall. And what it pays in county taxes per acre versus residential. And let's not stop there, let's go to downtown. So this is what our building downtown pays in county taxes per acre versus the mall, the Walmart, and residential. I breezed through a lot of information and want you to realize this isn't complex math that I'm doing here, it's 5th grade division. It's not hard, don't overthink this stuff. I want you to get into a mindset of efficiency and productivity. We already do this when we talk about cars, right? When we talk about cars, could y'all imagine if we're having coffee and I'm like, hey, my truck gets 650 miles per tank, it's killing it. You'd laugh at me. You're like, Joe, come on, that's stupid. It's got a big tank. That's not how we gauge efficiency. We say miles per gallon, and the numbers change when I say miles per gallon. So we should all be driving BMW Acetas at 70 miles per gallon. Sorry to you Prius owners, but 1955 technology is more efficient. That's a fact. It's also more dangerous. If you have a head-on on this thing, you're like stuck. But anyway, making the point about this, across the whole country we've done this, and for every we take all of our data and mash it together as a full sample set. For every dollar of county taxes somebody out in the county is paying to the county, their brother and sister in the city is paying about 5 times that. Here's the Walmart, here's the mall, that's a 2-story building. This could be in Driggs, Idaho, Durham, North Carolina, or Dallas. As soon as you start stacking stories, 2 stories, 3 stories, 6 stories. I'm not talking skyscrapers, folks. You build that wealth on Main Street, and there it is writ large. So we tend to look at the city as like a series of layers, the way that your body gets looked at by a doctor. So we can do a series of CAT scans to see what's going on in your community. And back to Asheville, so here's like an economic MRI. This is our entire county. I've got non-taxable here. This is a massive park. This is Mount Mitchell. The Blue Ridge Parkway comes through town. This is Mount Pisgah. Those 2 parks are federal forest. They don't pay taxes. I don't care about it. It gives me nothing, so I just gray them out. Low value in green, purple is high value. So we have low value up here. This is a big purple splotch right there. That's the Biltmore estate. That's the Vanderbilt mansion. That's America's largest house. When Bill Cecil, heir to the Vanderbilt fortune, shows up, his house is worth $100 million. We all genuflect and thank him for his time. It's a very important person, right? But it's not fair. He's got a 180,000 square foot house. That's like twice the size of a Walmart. And his lot, his parcel of land, is 2,000 acres. So he's got the biggest gas tank. That's not a fair comparison. So rather than total value, let's do value per acre. And I'll just show it to you in 3D. Can y'all guess where downtown Asheville is? Boom, right? So remember, we're all paying the same county millage rate. We're all paying 6 mils to our county. So if you lay a blanket across this model at 6 mils, where's the county getting all of its money? Boom. So for my brothers and sisters who live out here in Fairview who think they're paying high taxes because their cousins out here don't pay that much taxes, they have no clue what we're paying. That's their tragic limitation. We can also see inside the model, 10 miles away, this is our little sister, Black Mountain. We can see its Main Street popping up. It's a little village of 12,000 people. And you can see that same urban form in it. It's got a nice little Main Street, and there it is, boom. So we can learn from this model. We find weird stuff everywhere we go. This is Palm Beach County. You can pretty much tell where the ocean is, right there. But things like this was kind of interesting. This is on Main Street, a 3-story building. This is a skyscraper 2 blocks away. The Main Street building is 10.5 million an acre. The taller, bigger building is 9.2 million an acre. When people see my talk, they typically go, "Oh, you just want to see tall buildings everywhere." I'm like, no, it's not about that. I just want you to see data. I want you to have information and make an informed decision. This building is more productive than that. Don't believe your eyes. Look at the information, right? Just for fun, we grabbed all of Donald's property. So this is before he became president. So the Donald's pulling about $400,000 of value per acre, which is actually less productive than the poor shotgun shacks in the poor black neighborhood. These are more productive than him. 3 of these buildings are condemned. You can see the white signs on the door. This building actually caught on fire. When I showed this to the city commission, one of the commissioners says to me, he goes, "Well, that's not right." I said, "Correct. It's the truth." Y'all get it? Look at the data. So we did Minneapolis. Here's Hennepin County. You can pretty much see where downtown is. And they had some growth toward the river. Edina's kind of in here. This is the Weitz Center. But this was what I thought was pretty stunning. This is the retail productivity model of their retail taxes. And up here we have downtown. This is Mall of America. Who would have thought that downtown is 10 times the productivity of Mall of America in retail taxes? We have these biases when we look at information, these biases that we bring into our own communities, where we essentially have belief systems without any looking at the data. There's no evidence there. So there are biases that everybody goes, when they go to the Mall of America, they make big purchases. Certainly, there's lots of people that fly in on planes and make purchases, certainly. But those little purchases every single day add up, and there's the information. So you all, just to go through your information, by the way, I like the beaver. We're from North Carolina. Our tax system is pretty simple. So we have to go back and kind of figure you all out. So here's the way our tax system works. We have, if y'all purchase a house in North Carolina, you make a purchase, the tax assessor gives it a reduction down to about 80 to 85% of its market value to get a taxable value. And then we multiply our tax rate on that and you're done. Y'all are more complex. It's a Minnesota thing. You've got your market value. Then right off the top, you do a series of reductions. You start to eliminate things based on different reductions that your state has given you, homestead exemptions, disabled vets, if you have a solar panel on something. Then that makes your taxable value. Then you have a rate. Don't tax me, don't tax the fellow behind the tree. We're a country of tax evaders. That's how we operate. It's very efficient. That's not a joke, you guys. Very serious. So here's your county total value. There's the piece of Northfield that's in Dakota up there. So this is total value, or miles per tank. You see the big parcels of land along the highway in Faribault that are super valuable. You see your mill here that's potent. But that's total value. This is value per acre. The map changes. You can start to see the hot spots. Here you are in 3D. And you can see Northfield and Faribault. And you can pretty much spot your downtown pretty easily, right? Boom. Right there. Your city is, y'all annexed this land, and we'll get into this in a little bit, but that's the amount of land you've added on the outside of St. Louis, right there. To put it in perspective, it's like the size of your historic core, and it's a lot of real estate to add on to your city. So here's the value when we started doing this stuff. And interestingly, y'all have a way that you keep your condominium data on a separate set of books, so we didn't catch it at first. And when we did and added them in, you can see you have a title in purple core, but it spreads when you add in the condos. So basically, this is before what it looked like, and this is after. You see the purple spots popping up like freckles in there. So the condominiums are where you're killing it in value up here, and then this one parcel back there. And it's essentially you're stacking dollar bills on top of each other. So here's your downtown, total value, value per acre. You can see the heat along the spine of Main Street. And then you add in the condos, you can start to see them better there. Downtown in 3D. Your county's about 5% non-taxable, which is on the low side, but you also don't have a lot of the pressures that typical counties have with fast growth, so this is okay, just keep it in check. Your city is about 35% non-taxable. Carlton shows up as taxable in your books initially because there's some piece of it that's taxable within it, so it skews the whole parcel that way. But we went ahead and undid it and made it non-taxable because that's how it actually functions, like the other college, like St. Louis. Your downtown's about 26% non-taxable. This is pretty average. Asheville's about 44% non-taxable by comparison. How rude. Your city is a portion or shareholder of the county. That's the footprint inside Rice County. This is the property tax that you all pay to Rice County, right? It is Rice County taxpayers. So that's a 1-to-21 ratio of productivity. To think of it another way, imagine you had 100 salespeople at a shoe shop and one person selling 21% of the shoes. How would you treat that person? Exactly, yeah. So there's a benefit to y'all working together that you can grow the county's wealth in the process. When you look at the city by itself, your downtown is a shareholder of Northfield. It's about 1.4% of the footprint. It's about 6% of the area. That's a 1-to-4 ratio of productivity. You should be higher than that. It's still good. But for a city your size, you should have think of your downtown has some capacity to it. But when you look at your downtown as a shareholder of the county, we didn't even know how to, what do you call that as a percentage? 1/1000th of a percent or something. This is your potency in county taxes. That's a 1-to-81 ratio of productivity. So your downtown, what's good for your downtown is great for your city. It's unbelievable for your county. Your county needs to be all over helping you with your downtown because they're going to get a big bang for their buck. On top of that, y'all need to learn, or your county needs to learn, how to transfer some of these lessons into Faribault as well because they're fairly flat over there. Incidentally, somebody asked me yesterday during Q&A about Faribault that apparently Faribault is adding a lot more boxes and commercial buildings and industrial buildings, and there's lots of growth along the highway. And just looking at the model, you can see it here. It's fairly flat. I mean, yeah, it may be growing, but the question is it good calories? Are you just eating French fries, or is it producing quality growth for your community? That's why we do the economic models, to see, is it robust enough? Are you getting purples or are you getting greens? And when you look at the numbers, so my analyst, Kate Raybon, did the quick down and dirty analysis this morning. This was kind of wild. Faribault is only 2% more taxable than y'all. So even though you have these colleges that have a lot of non-taxable property, you're about equal to Faribault from a taxable standpoint. Yet you're producing, in Northfield, you're producing, what is that? Double the peak value versus their peak. So you're getting a much higher potency out of your downtown. And your average value for the whole city, your average value per acre for your whole city is $1.6 million. Their average value is not even hitting $200,000. They'll wash over you for a second. That's a high level of potency that you're achieving in your community, which is awesome. Now it brings along with it other issues. There's affordability issues and other stuff. You have the tax base to make that stuff happen. So let's talk about your history for a second. We found this really weird postcard. You don't know what that's all about. But just to, again, we're going to go through and do some samples of just your counties, like your genetic material. Here's the Faribault Mall. It's about, let's call it $250,000 an acre of productivity. It's not that great. We'll just leave it on the bottom of the slide as like a control subject. So you can benchmark other product against it. So this is Cub Foods, is more productive than the mall. Target is almost double the productivity of the mall. Here's your Family Fare, it's about 500,000, and Menards at 500,000. This is more potent than that. It is. That's the numbers, about 600,000. Your Walmart's pretty strong at $750,000, or about 3 times the Faribault West Mall. And then you get into this. This is 800,000. So this is, was that 4 times Faribault Mall? Almost. Let's go back to the Target for a second. Target's 500,000. That's 800,000. It's called 900,000. Almost double the Target. This thing, I don't know what you'd call this, but this is a strip mall down in Faribault, but it's about 1.4 million an acre. When you get into your housing, your average housing out in the county is about $100,000 of value per acre to the county. Your average county resident inside the city limits is 800,000. So 100,000 about 8 times the productivity of your county brothers and sisters out there in county taxes. Now let's talk about some of your multifamily stuff. 500,000, $1 million, 500,000, 1.7 million. Would y'all have thought that that was, again, what was that Target? Target's about 500,000. This is like 3 times, more than 3 times the productivity of a Target. Nothing to write home about architecturally, but you know, it's productive. This is killing it at $7.6 million of value per acre, which is super high, which is great. And when you get into your old buildings, by the way, we were really kind of enamored by this Dan Patch thing. There's like the conversation about Dan Patch going on now. And Dan Patch refers to this old streetcar that used to go to Minneapolis that was named after the original Dan Patch over here. That's Dan Patch. By the way, check this out. Oxen. There are oxes in this picture, and these people had the technology to build this wealth that you have now. So, speaking of which, let's run through these. This is the Scriver building. Here it is on the stereoscope. There's horses in this picture when it was built in 1870, and it's pulling $3 million of value per acre today. That's, was that, the Target's 500,000 per acre. The Faribault West is 250, and this is still with you. And obviously part of your celebrations. These buildings, 1900, 1886, 1865, $5 million of value per acre since 1865. Remember that Walmart is doing $750,000. It's going to be gone in 15 years. So everything from 4 million to 8 million right here, 1872. This building survived. Must have been a fire, or somebody just decided they didn't want the cornice anymore. But in 1865, it's pulling $5 million of value per acre. And you see all of these. This is a picture from 1890, and these values are insane. think of that community wealth that your great-grandparents left you. How did they know to do this? What was their design review process? How many citizens boards did they have to come up with this thing? Yet they left you this wealth. You know, consider this. Like, there's a form there. This was genetically what we did when we moved someplace. We built up our cities. We built up a downtown. We built up on top of things. These were probably wood buildings before they became brick buildings. That's how we built cities. So here's a building. This is kind of interesting. This building is actually a little less productive than this. This is 5.9 million an acre, a two-story building. This is bigger at 5.6. So that's the facts of the data. This is a new building that y'all have done, pulling about $6.5 million value per acre. So do more of that, that's pretty good. This building here at 7.8 million. This building here at 10.7 million. It's because it's got extra stories below it. It also faces the river. It's got an amenity. And then this is killing it at 11.1 million. Now, I will say this, as trained as an urban designer, this could be better architecturally. It could have a better fit with your community. It could be more joined into the rest of your downtown. But what it is actually quite valuable. And then this is your big breadwinner at 13.5 million an acre. So those are your types. We have this bar chart to kind of explain it. This is before we did the condo dissolve, but red is your single-use commercial like Menards, Walmart. Blue is your average single family right here, and just typical residential. Green is when you start to get into mixed uses, and you see that bump right there when you start to add stories. And let's add the condos in. So here's the Holland building, which is a condo, the Northfield crossing condos at this end of the model. And think of it this way, we've gone into the three-dimensional model and just pulled out some samples so you can see it as a bar chart. So basically half an acre of that, if you just pulled off half an acre of this building, which is about 5 of them, it would equal the entire, let's call it 4-acre shoulder strip mall. If you had a 1/4 acre of this, it would equal the 2.5 acre that. If you had 4 acres of the 400 block, it would equal the 17-acre Walmart. What that looks like from a footprint difference is this. If you had that much 400 block, it would equal that much Walmart. Oops, sorry, I'm getting ahead. 1 acre of this equals a 17-acre Walmart, and half an acre of that. So basically, 35% of this building, if you just basically cut it right there and just took this piece, that would equal the 12-acre target. 2 acres of this would equal the 15-acre IKEA over in Minneapolis. If you had 64 acres of that, it would equal the 71-acre Mall of America. This building is more productive by $1 million of value per acre over the Mall of America. That's your numbers. So this was kind of cool. You had birth dates in your data, so we went ahead and made an animated map of how you guys created yourself. So here's the growth of your community. Carlton shows up, and you start building a town toward it, then St. Olaf shows up. And you can see how you maintain a grid kind of connecting the two dumbbell ends of your city. And the grid is connected and continuous until after World War II, when we take a different attitude about how we grow cities. And you can see it down here. It becomes this disconnected, we call it mitochondria of cul-de-sacs, but it's just kind of these different pieces, which is a different lifestyle, but it also changes your civic pattern in that process. It also brings out other inefficiencies. With the grid, you can get through it a lot easier. There's a lot more choices to go through it. This changes that behavior so that everybody's got to use just 2 or 3 roads to get through an entire quadrant of your city. I'll play this again because it's just kind of fun to see. It's also interesting to see for 200 years you basically kept yourself in this bubble. And then in the span of 40 years, you double your land area down here. We just glued you onto Minneapolis and grabbed the 2 counties in between just to see what you look like. And it's kind of neat. You have like this little mountain right here. And then there's a good distance before the ooze of Minneapolis that's sliding around down here. So industry, we're looking at some of your, one of the things that Nate asked us to do is look at the new land as a partial industrial area. And there's some lessons from your current industry just to consider. This is the original mill on the river right there. And it's not, it's not pulling that great of value because it's got a discount because it's historic. It's also inefficient from the scale of larger mills, but it's still productive. But this building can be turned into something else when the mill decides to vacate it. This could become lofts, it could be a lot of different things. It's actually a pretty cool building and it's got a great site. This is a little bit more harder to convert. So there's a trade-off. It's more efficient from a business standpoint. It's a larger industrial box. You're getting more value out of it by about 5 times the value. But it is what it is. So as you consider new industrial, do consider the architecture. And there's some lessons that we've learned in other places, like in Ogden. This is an industrial, I think they build rocket parts in here. And this building's under tax increment finance and it's still pulling about $500,000 of value, but this can convert to something else and you'll see a value bump when the TIF expires. Or things like this. This is one of our favorite examples. This is Durham, North Carolina. And these are all used to be tobacco manufacturing facilities. They're now all lofts in downtown. So this is the Chesterfield pulling about $28 million of value per acre. So you're able to harvest and recycle those buildings and still continue to use the architecture, even though the stuff on the inside changes. The other thing we did is we measured your people. We just assumed, again, our bias, we thought a lot more of you would be going to Minneapolis and St. Paul. We only had about 4% of your population going to Minneapolis and about 2% going to St. Paul. You actually retain a lot of your employment, a lot of your residents as employees in your community, which is super, super impressive. So that's because you have large employers here too. You send about 14% of your residents down to Faribault. And then this is Lakeville right here. But that's good. Now Nate asked me the next question, this may be the next data we'll look into, which is how many people do you import? Because that will tell you if you probably all know about your housing issues. The site up here, again, it's a big scale site. We ran one example, this is your current value, is pulling about $5 million in total value for the site as is. We went ahead and ran it as a solar panels with some industry and some commercial, and it pops up to about $100 million. And I'll come back to the values. I just want you to see how we're breaking down the land area. So this is the whole site. This much is solar, this much is industry, and this much is commercial. And then these are how the values change. The solar panels don't give you a whole lot of property value. They give you other benefits. They give you energy and things that you can sell as a product. Industry gives you more value, more bang for the buck than commercial. And then another example, case 2, was keeping those same uses, reducing their footprint, but adding in more housing into it. That increases in some civic stuff, like a school or something. That increases the value to about $200 million. Here's the distribution of areas. Here's their uses. It's hard to capture all of this stuff just by looking at it. So we'll give you all of these slides and also the math behind it. This is case site 3. This is doing all of those other uses, but adding into it some mixed use stuff. Which is maybe like a little piece of a downtown in here. And you start to see the purples pop up. So that increases the value now to $230 million. And then this is, let's dial up the mixed use a little bit higher, do more of a downtown here. And we have to kind of step out to see it. You start to see you're building a whole other downtown over here. And that's going to be a lot of value to that. So here's case 1. Here's case 2 by adding in some single family housing, which is the green stuff. Here's case 3, which is you add in some mixed use. And here's if you dial up the pressure on the mixed use, you get a higher value. So that's the numbers that we ran, but it drew more questions than providing these answers. It's nice to have these numbers, but really you need to do another investigation on yourself. Because what was interesting to see, the question we started asking is, do you have the market to be able to supply that thing? Or are there other areas inside your city that you just have to look at with a different lens? So this is your breakdown of your community before you added that acreage on the north side. This is what you're currently using in your community. This is your vacant. So you basically had 25% of your city was vacant before you went down and bought down more land or expanded your territory. 25% of your city is a lot of area to fill out. And you want to add more to that? So you're now looking with your addition of the north side, you're looking at 32% of your city is vacant. So is that the best place to grow into? Or should you reserve that and conserve it for the future, or use it for less use? The other thing to pay attention to is, Nate was talking with us about the new properties that are coming in and adding that kind of value as they come online. So you're going to be growing more wealth in your community. Can you get more purples around your purples, so to speak? Can you fix the spine that comes through your city that suppresses the value as well? The other thing to pay attention to is your road length to value ratio. So as we look at the different relationships, yes, you can harvest money, but if you have to put a road out to it, it's going to cost you something, right? So here's your road length for the different projects. So eventually you get to a point where it levels off, and in some cases this is your value. So this is what happens with suburban development. You get less value and more road length, and there's a point at which you urbanize and get an efficiency over your road length. Does that make sense? Y'all follow me? That you want to get, if you just have a single-story building, if you have an expensive road, it doesn't pay for itself. So your local economics is really important. We thought this was hilarious. It just really tells a story about who you are. You're essentially this triplet city, which brings challenges, but it also is an incredible opportunity. We looked at other college towns to see. We have these samples in our file. University of Florida is a much larger case study for you all. They have 40,000 students. They're essentially a one-to-one relationship of students to residents, which is kind of insane. But what they've done is they've really tried to find a way to maximize that ocean. So it's non-taxable, they know that. And their downtown is kind of over here. So what they've been focusing on is growing toward the university. They know the students are there. They know the students have wealth. Just ask their parents. They're just dropping their money all on the streets for you all. And so you can harvest that. So they're harvesting it in Gainesville and growing their downtown to the university and providing those university villages. Just a place to get a pizza or a beer, putting it closer to the campus. In Durham, this is Duke University, they have a bigger problem because of the highway that bifurcates the campus from downtown. They have a much better downtown, a much more robust downtown than Gainesville, but they can't capitalize on it because of the physical infrastructure. This was made real to me just crossing, Route 3 through town. It's hostile. Is there a way to tame that to bring your community together? So the other thing that was kind of we were chatting over at Nate's desk yesterday, and I didn't realize that this is all part of the college over here in addition to that, which is a pretty sizable area. So let's take a look at that. Here's the way that the college uses its property, but they've got all this stuff, right? Same scale. This is University of Minnesota at the same scale. So let's look at this for a second. 3,000 students, 52,000 students in here, and it's pretty much the same footprint. That's a lot of territory that they have. So starting the conversation with the schools to get them to be efficient as well is something y'all in it together. So you can actually harvest part of your city to work with the colleges as well. And this is a tremendous lesson. 1890, this was given to you by your great-grandparents. This question came up last night, and we talked about adding this example in. When you look at these values in the time component, it's super important. So we did a project in Charleston, South Carolina. Here's Charleston. And when I presented to them, you can see where downtown Charleston is, right? Boom. And we told them, like, look, you didn't make the ocean, so you can't claim that value. We're going to go ahead and erase it. This is what humans made in value, right? So they predate the Declaration of Independence. Charleston's an old city. We know the birth date of our country, right? 1776. This building, built in 1686, predates our country by almost 100 years. So there it is. This is the oldest liquor store in the entire United States. That's a revolutionary getting his drink on right there. But these are all the buildings that predate our country.
Here they are in plan. So those buildings predate, or they survived hurricanes, fires, half a dozen wars, an earthquake, and they're still standing there producing taxes. 21 acres of those buildings. In 2015, when we ran the numbers, this is what they paid in county taxes. So they paid city taxes and a business improvement district tax on top of it. So the county got $600,000. Out in the county, there's this thing, which is the exact same acreage pretty much, and this is what it paid the same year. Now remember what I said about time. This is designed to be gone by 2020. Is that the pattern that you want? Is it going to give you something? Yes. So the other question that came up about Faribault yesterday, which is Faribault is adding new boxes, but what's the longevity of that? Is it building you wealth? Can you find ways to bequeath wealth to your great-grandkids? And that's the way to think about this stuff. Sometimes it might be worth doing a tax increment or doing something as a spur to get it going, to get that value. So if we're not measuring this stuff, we don't understand it. The other thing is we don't understand the subsidies that are baked into the system. So I just mentioned two words, TIF or general fund contribution, anything like that. But if you just look at your tax system has subsidies baked into it. There's a subsidy, sure, if I show up as a developer and we're going to deal with the city and the mayor and we have a community meeting and y'all give me a density bonus or something like that, or a tax discount, and everybody yells at me that I'm some rapacious developer from Chicago that's going to destroy the town, and I walk out the door with my bonus, that is indeed a bonus. But how our tax system works bakes subsidy into it. And I'll explain one. This is Peoria, Illinois. So Peoria told us they had a parking problem in their downtown, so we measured it. So here's their water, here's their grass and green space, here's their streets and sidewalks, here's all their surface parking. Looks like they got plenty. Here's their buildings. Now what's crazy is that building is a 100% parking garage. That's a parking garage, this is a parking garage, that's a parking garage. Probably about 10% of their buildings are parking garages in downtown. And I'm like, can y'all say you have a parking problem? Looks like you got a perception problem. Now the other thing is there's a tax effect in this. So when the tax assessor goes out and puts value on properties, the average building in Peoria is about $35 a square foot. The value of parking is about $1.50. So the street doesn't care. The street's going to cost you all $9 a square foot in front of this or in front of that. So here's the question. When did they decide to give parking a 23 times discount? Because that's what's happening mathematically, right? If I'm paying taxes on this and this at the same millage rate, I'm paying 1/23 the taxes on $1.50 than 35 bucks, right? This has the same cost. So when you do the whole city, the reason why we always see these drops around downtown is because downtown is usually followed by a choker collar with parking all around it. When you go out into the burbs and they're pretty flat, the reason why they're so flat is because they're mostly parking. So we did the whole county this way. This is the entire county and land area. If you take all the buildings and shove them side by side, this is the footprint for an entire county's worth of buildings. Why do they have to exhaust the whole thing? Now, okay, Joe, that's un-American. We got lots of land. We should stretch out a little bit. I don't want to have you sitting next to me and I have to listen to your dog bark, right? Okay. So that's the parking that you need to service all those buildings once you stretch yourself out. Here's the liability. So they have 8.6 square miles of buildings, 9 square miles of parking for the whole county. And then this is their liability. This is everything else. Berms, buffers, backyards, farms, parks, whatever. Here's the money that comes off or goes to inside the community. So let's put it on a per square mile basis. They're getting $1 billion a square mile of buildings. They're getting $40 million out of their parking per square mile, and it's costing them $250 million a square mile for the roads. This is everything else. So let me ask you a financial question. Why is the parking paying for itself? If this is where we store the cars, why are they consuming $250 million of our cost and not paying its fair share? Let's at least equalize it. Otherwise, be aware that when you don't have the money for the after-school program, the art teacher, when you don't have that money, it's because it's buried somewhere else. Because the roads don't fix themselves. You don't just put one down and it just takes care of itself forever. You have to constantly maintain that stuff. So they have enough roads to go from Peoria to Vancouver. How many roads do y'all have? Are you measuring this stuff? What's your liability? So when you don't have the money for this stuff, it's not that you don't have the money, it's that you've buried it into other uses. It's subsidized. It's an invisible subsidy, but you have to make it so you can see it. So I'll close with a costing example. So that's the revenue side. There's a little bit of cost. We were hired by Lafayette, Louisiana. It's like, okay, now that we know where the money is, where's it going? And can we do an ROI? So we had Photoshop Kevin in on this one. Kevin's like, could you just explain it like the way that you do buildings? We're like, sure, fine. So here's the problem in municipal finance. So in business, we have assets, we have liabilities, we have revenues, we have expenses, all of that stuff. In government, governments follow a CAFR standard. It's set by the government finance officers. In the CAFR standards, as a developer, when I build roads and give them to you, that road is listed in your community's books as an asset. You have revenue ledgers, expense ledgers, and you have an asset ledger. The roads and pipes that developers give you sit in this little closet and depreciate. They're not folded into the system as part of the cash flow. So an asset to me is my computer, right there. If I had delivery vehicles, those would be assets. If I had real estate, if I had a retail store or something like that, that would be an asset. So we're sitting with the finance officer, and I said to her, I said, look, can you pick your roads up, and can you sell them to Baton Rouge? I can sell all of this stuff. Can you sell your roads to Baton Rouge or to New Orleans? And she goes, no. I said, that's liability. It's a fixed liability for you. You can't unown that road, right? And she goes, well, but our CAFR standards. I'm like, we're not going to follow your CAFR standards. And Chuck's like yelling, this is a liability. So we brand them like a real liability that they would be in my business. So when we fix a building, one of our buildings, we put one of those large air conditioners on the roof because we've got 28 units in it. The air conditioner we know is going to cost us $20,000 to $60,000. And we know that it's got a 15 to 20 year useful life. So if you move into one of our buildings, we're going to take a little piece of your rent and put it into a reserve account, a bond, or a savings or something to accrue it up to that 15-year life so that we then have that $60,000 to go out and buy another piece of equipment. We have to build that wealth, right? So when you got that road in 1960, that's what you should have set aside, that little red brick, in every single year thereafter, because that's the cost of the road when you have to relay it. Did y'all follow me? Problem is you kept on taking on more roads every single year since 1960, and you stopped in 2009. So this is your debt liability. This is your obligated ownership of the roads. The blue is your actual revenue that you have. Let me ask you a super complex municipal finance question. Do you have enough blue to pay for the red? Is it going to get any better over time? So let me make it easier for you. Do you have enough blue for the red? So your liability is 18 times your income. Now here's the scary thing. What did they do? They're broke. So they do what a lot of cities do. They're like, well, we're going to go out and get a bond to pay for the roads. The bond is not free money. The bonding agencies have first right of refusal on your revenue, so they're actually coming in and skimming off the top what you think you have. You only have 25 million, not 55 million. That's what they're losing in their bonded debt. So putting that aside, we sent everybody a bill for where they live. So this is the whole county floating in the lake. And you live out here, this is what you cost, this is what you're paying in taxes. So we're going to net your revenue against your expenses, what's in the black and what's in the red. Here's the whole county in 3D. You can see where they're bleeding their money all over the place. And if you drop this on the floor so everything pops up vertical, this is what it looks like. If anybody's colorblind, that's the colorblind model. But basically you can see how upside down this area is versus how positive these areas are. Now here's what's interesting. They told me, like, Joe, people really want to live out here. This is where everybody's moving to. And we said, yeah, that's what you're paying people to move out there. That's the subsidy that you're paying people. So just make sure you write it down somewhere and you keep yourself in that positive. We don't care how you develop. We just want you to make a conscious choice about that and understand your costs. So, but that's the pattern of a lot of American cities, that we've been going this way and just adding on to our city without thinking of the efficiency over a term of life. So I'll make it simple. In 1950, they had 34,000 people, 5 feet of pipe per person, 2.4 fire hydrants per thousand. They grew their population to 121,000 people. This is their, oops, just going crazy here. This is their population, this is their feet of pipe per person, and their fire hydrants per thousand. Remember what I showed you about your city growing in time? That within a span of 40 years, you doubled the size of your city? when for somehow, for the 100 years before that, you could live within that same land area? Did you add that many more people? So 350% growth in population, 1,000 and 2,000% growth in liability. Coming out of the war, every American city was so incredibly wealthy, and we squandered that wealth on a diet that we didn't think through the long-term effects of. And they told me they got rich. I was like, all right, we'll measure that. They got oil money out of the Gulf. Adjusted for today's dollars, that's what they used to be in 1950. They were poor, very poor. They got rich through the 60s, and they grew their wealth. They're actually richer than we are in Asheville. But that's only 160% growth in revenue. They did increase their revenue by 160%. They increased their liability 1,000 and 2,000%. That's bad math. That's like, I was telling Nate, it's like him getting a $2,000 a year raise and convincing his wife into building a 50,000 square foot addition on his house. He can't afford it. So this habit is baked into the way that we make decisions. We did last project is in Lancaster, California, just taking the next one, the Lancaster project, the Lafayette project. So here's Los Angeles, here's Lancaster, up and over the mountain. They have 953 miles of roads. There are 160,000 people. That's enough roads to go from Los Angeles to Portland. So let's take that Lafayette model and rethink it. Let's take all of the roads that they've built over time. This is their entire portfolio of roads. It's a fairly new city. Their great-grandparents went on a road building spree in the early 1900s. They went to sleep, and look what happened when their grandparents woke up after World War II. You can't help but notice that one, right? When you're left with that, that road comes back to haunt your parents 40 years later, and they have to rebuild that road. Now, what does your council do when they're hit with this huge capital budget or capital expense of doing that? Well, they let out more development to make some money. Well, that also adds more roads. This comes back to haunt you with the second rebuild, and it brings along with it this. So we just did a build-rebuild of all of the roads, and this is what it looks like. So you have that first wave that's kind of painful. You go ahead and repeat it. And then it gets bigger and bigger under its own weight and not adding more roads. So, just to close, weird things that are baked in your model. Behavioral economics is driving a lot of these decisions. This is one of the strangest things that we see in every city. This is Cheyenne, Wyoming, but this is just the dirt. So if you look at your tax bill, you'll see two things. You'll see the improvement value, and you'll see the dirt value of your property. We can go into the computer, just turn off all the buildings and look at the dirt value. And we do this to test everybody's, how good your assessor is from a mathematics standpoint, but also figure out your policy loopholes. But you expect the world to look like this. Everybody in this neighborhood has the same color. Everybody's $15,000 an acre in that neighborhood. That would be fair. If you go into a neighborhood, you assume that the dirt value is relatively flat from everybody in the neighborhood. Everybody's fairly equal. But when we were presenting this in Cheyenne, I was presenting to the community. I was like, hey, what's going on here? Where this is $15,000 an acre, and this is all the same zoning area over here. When you cross the street, land doubles in value. How does land double in value in the same zoning category? And the tax assessor was sitting in the front row, and she raises her hand, and she just yells out in the room, no, you don't understand. I was like, what am I missing? She goes, well, they have more land. The more land you have, the lower the value. The mayor started laughing so hard, he almost spat coffee out of his nose. And I'm like, really? I get more of your stuff, and you're going to give me a discount? Can you make more land? Like, land's a finite commodity, like gold or diamonds. I mean, if I get a bigger diamond, is it cheaper? She's like, well, no. And I'm like, why does that work that way with land? She goes, well, that's our standard. I'm like, all right, well, this fella's got 3 miles of street around the property. This fella's got 200 feet. They got more infrastructure. She goes, yeah, we don't count infrastructure as part of the assessment. So as a corporation, you're going to put stuff into the ground that makes that land worth something, and you don't want to recoup that money? She goes, that's not part of our standard. There's less people that can afford big parcels, so we're just basing that based on transactional costs. I'm like, well, hold on a second. You got a bigger parcel. I'm sure if the planning director would agree, I can put more stuff there. I mean, you can clearly see there's a mall on top of it. More stuff means more commerce, which means more theft, which means more police calls. More commerce means more collisions or fire calls. She goes, well, I'm counting that. So your soft costs aren't even baked into that? She goes, no, that's not part of our standard. the reason why I was at the assessors conference was to ask them, like, where'd you guys get this standard from? Now, to their credit, I will say this, it was really funny, their response, I was like walking into a lion's den, I'm not an assessor, and they thought this was hilarious, by the way. And to their credit, they're like, we don't know where this came from. Their magazine is called Fair and Equitable. So I asked them, is it fair or is it equitable? And they're like, no. I'm like, all right, if you don't know where it came from and you don't think it's fair and equitable, what can you do about it? Like, you need to speak to Larry. I'm like, Larry who? They're like, Larry Clark. So I tracked this guy, Larry Clark, down, who's super awesome. Larry thought this was funny, but I was like, what's up with this? How is it, if it's not fair, if it's not equitable, what can you do about it? He's like, well, we'll change it. It just takes a while. He's like, no one's really pointed it out. Probably has something to do with agricultural policy. Maybe it came from the 1700s, but now that you pointed it out, we'd have to get rid of it. It's mind-blowing. You think that there's some adults that have kind of thought all this stuff through, and it's kind of just, it's just a system that's been cobbled through over time. So anyway, these aren't invisible market forces making real estate happen that way. There are things baked into the system that you have to pull out. So here's your land value per acre. And y'all are in better shape than Cheyenne. Minnesotans are better with data and information than people in Wyoming. You see on the whole. But you can see how the smaller parcels kind of zoom in. This is the city. You know, the smaller parcels are more potent than the larger parcels. You know, that's your data. You also have the additional quirk of a new transaction sets the price higher than the person that's next to it that's been on the property for a while. You'll see that. You see that in the model out here in particular. So, you know, just to close, all of this stuff is hiding in plain sight. Just do your math on this stuff. Suspend your biases, you know, your belief systems, and let the data inform you. And also understand that tax policy shapes our physical environment more than we think. In Normandy, you were taxed on your building footprint. So that's what you're taxed on down here. And people figured that out, and they started projecting their buildings out over the street. When you go up to Norman architecture, realize that it's tax policy that's driving its aesthetic. When you go to England, for 100 years, King William III instituted a window tax as a way to gauge community wealth because glass was expensive back then. So the more windows you have, obviously the more wealth, so you were taxed higher, more shillings per window. And so what people did is they started boarding up their windows to avoid taxes. In France, everything below your roof line was considered your building. Anything above it was considered your roof. When you go through Paris and see mansard roofs, it's a tax loophole. So realize this stuff. So Northfield, y'all are $1.4 billion in taxable value. You almost can buy a Viking with that. The Vikings are $2.6 billion. Your county can. You can go and buy almost 3 Viking football teams. And I can tell you, like, Ziggy Wolf knows Harrison Smith's towel bill. I can tell you the cups in my nightclub cost 5 cents a pop. Why? Because we need to make revenue to keep the business in place. You need to understand what the cost of a mile of road or to plow a mile of road is. What's the cost to your community and what are the infrastructures? Your accountant doesn't care if you buy a boat, right? Your accountant cares if you can afford a boat. Your downtown is your golden goose, but you need to feed it. And we put numbers on a map so you can see them. So, thank you.
Well, we have some time for questions. Does anybody have anything?
I'm a planning commissioner in a town nearby, also a planning commissioner here to our township. And I've been pushing in the city at least this idea of upstairs commercial buildings. And the eye roll that I got when I suggested that as part of the answer to bringing in Walmart, I'm surprised that they were able to see again. How do I push back against standard claims? I push for all kinds of things. And the first claim they say, well, we can't ask the developer to do that because they'll just go someplace else. If I had the quantifications that you have there, I might be able to push back. What is the answer to that basic fundamental problem? Because I saw it happen with what you call the North Territory. The developers came in and had beautiful pictures of the scene of the future crime. How do we solve the balance between the people who come in already invested in the decision that we're being asked to make. So much so that they spent money on the engineering and they're ready to go. They've got their shovels in hand, they're ready to have the ceremony.
Well, I mean, the developer or the politician has the right for the ceremony, which,
They're both, right? By the time the planning commission gets to think about it, there are people whose heart and soul is embedded in that people.
yeah, I mean, it really, you know, a lot of that's going to be a conversation of your elected officials, but also your broader community. You know, in defense of the developer, you do have a lot of money invested by the time you get to a planning commission. So it's kind of frustrating to spend all of that money and follow the rules. And then you get somewhere and everybody pulls the carpet out from under you. And that money just doesn't disappear for us. Because what ends up happening, if I go through a loss like that and spend $100,000, then I'm more incentive to make sure that something happens the next time. You know, it's not like we have money just falling out of our pockets as developers. We have to make it somehow. So there is a cost to the developer, which adds frustration. If the politicians don't understand the hostility that's set up in that environment, then it shouldn't come down to that. The rules of what we want to achieve need to be in place before that. You know, so a lot of what this data can show is like what you want to be when you grow up. What does a Walmart really give us? Let's run the numbers on that. Bloomberg Magazine or Bloomberg Online, you can Google it. The average Walmart consumes as much police services as it pays in property taxes. So you're essentially net zero on revenue. So and the thing is, in defense of the politicians, they don't know that stuff. You know, they think new is better, new building, new is better than nothing, and in a way it is, but it comes with a lot more liability. So what can we all as a unit, as citizens, as members of planning boards, or just a regular citizen do to help raise the level of education? In my world, I do this. I just try to take a lot of complex data and simplify it to like a 6th grade audience. And it's not to say that we're all illiterate. It's just to say that everybody's busy. They don't have time to like read planning books or nerd out. So we use pictures. You know, there's articles that are written on all this stuff. And that's actually Chuck does a great job with Strong Towns, publishing this information.
Our commercial property owners here, I think, are well aware of the charts. They know that they're paying a lot of taxes compared to the top line residential area. I'm driven to suggest what we do is we look at land as being a commodity that we can't get more of. So why don't we just tax the land and forget about taxing the improvements?
Well, one is that's not constitutional in the state of Minnesota, but if it were, a lot of people ask me about like, okay, Joe, this is great. What would you do next? By the way, this is a good book, Good to Great, about businesses and corporations and how do you make the tough decisions. So anybody that runs a business knows that sooner or later you run into a very difficult decision you have to make. And it's better to deal with it as soon as you know, rather than let it lag on because it becomes more expensive. This could be like having to fire somebody from your team. It's just not a good fit. And he tracks business after business that made those tough decisions. So Walgreens and Eckerd. In the 1980s, they were pretty much parallel tracks. Walgreens made difficult decisions and Eckerd didn't. Eckerd collapsed and Walgreens grew. Cities are no different. But the point that you brought up about, anybody know Henry George, land value taxation? Henry George is a tax economist in the 1800s, and he came up with this policy that you look at, you think of the housing pressures that Minneapolis has right now, or Boston, or Seattle, or San Francisco, where housing's going through the roof. And think about our problems today. There were nothing compared to what was happening on the eastern seaboard in the 1800s when all of these immigrants come over from Europe and inflate all of the housing. And Henry George thought it was patently unfair that just because your family were the Copleys and they stepped off the Mayflower, you could build that land and sit on it. The entire world has to pay for the services, or the city has to pay for the services, and you're choosing not to use the land. So we still have to pipe it, we still have to put a sidewalk by it, we still have to plow it, all of that stuff, and you're not paying your fair share of taxes. So he came up with this idea of just eliminating what's on the land and then just tax based on your location or amenity. You own land in our community, you're going to at least pay your fair share of taxes in your community. Pittsburgh adopted a form of land value taxation, or Georgism, in the 1970s. And if y'all know what happened in the 1970s and 1980s, a lot of American cities realized seeing their buildings getting torn down. In Pittsburgh, that didn't happen because they set the tax rate based on building location rather than the actual building. So in Northfield, if I have two buildings side by side and I tear one building down, I've just dropped my tax value, right? There's no improvement there. In Pittsburgh, they cut the taxes at your locational value. So go ahead and tear your building down. We're still going to hit you with these taxes at this level because that's your opportunity cost to our city. So Pittsburgh didn't experience as many teardowns. So y'all never heard of Henry George or Georgism. Elizabeth Maggie Phillips is a Georgist. She's also got great eyebrows. I love her eyebrows. She was a Georgist. She thought this was really fair, a good way of thinking about your city economically. And she wanted to teach children how to change their tax system because adults are too set in their ways. Everything seems so difficult for adults. So she invented a board game to teach us land value taxation. Does that look familiar? So if y'all have played Monopoly, you understand land value taxation. And I would agree, I would take that attitude into your community. What's your opportunity cost in your community? We're doing this in Lancaster, California. We're coming up with a transportation utility fee to figure out the cost of the entire road system and reverse that burden into the community. So you want to choose to live way out in the edge of the town and drive on 10 miles of road, you're going to pay for it. Sorry, it's your choice. And we're looking at different ways to dial it. It's not going to be any one solution. We talked about this last night. There's going to be a series of nudges, small moves that you want to make. And some of this is education, getting people to realize it. But oftentimes it's just what little things can you do to make sure you're not being wasteful. Does that help? It's a long answer, but I had to show her. She's awesome.
We did all your calculations that are based on taxation against acreage of land. Why is that the format you use versus the square footage of the buildings? That's how we're taxed, is what the square footage of the building.
If I have, so the question is why I'm on land and not the building? Well, they're conjoined, right? If I have a massive tract of land with a little teeny building on it, I've wasted all of that opportunity on that parcel.
There's also a massive Walmart that's covering all of the land. So if they've got 35 acres, they might have a building that's consuming a lot of that space.
Not really. A typical Walmart's about, the building's going to cover maybe like, I'd say a little less than a third of the property. But still, it doesn't matter. They wasted that opportunity. There's nothing else in the parking lot.
So part of the formula is based on opportunity as well.
Well, no, it's productivity, right? The gallon of gas. I don't care if it's premium or just regular unleaded. It's a gallon of gas, and what are you getting on that gallon? That's your efficiency. So if you've got land and you've got an opportunity for that land, how are you utilizing that opportunity? What's your productivity? What's your unit of per gallon out of it? So, as an architect, I think it'd be more awesome if we gave incentives for granite buildings that would last, 300 years. That could be cool. Right now, there's a tax penalty on that because I'm adding more value on your property. Those buildings that I showed you that are actually very, very productive, a lot of that's because they're brick. They're built to last. As opposed to a Walmart, it's $50 a square foot. It's just designed to fail.
What changes have you seen communities make in their code to effectuate different building type? For instance, the industrial, instead of a big, what's happening is we get big boxes with a sea of asphalt for one business in an industrial park. Every community sees those as godsend, and yet there's a huge amount of infrastructure going out and past to the next great big unit. What have you seen communities actually do to change that?
I've seen a lot of different changes in different places, and there's really no one answer to this. In Canada and Guelph, one of the things that they realized in their industrial zone, that they were getting uses out there that really didn't need to be there. So when you think of industry from a zoning standpoint, that's the stuff that's going to be nasty and kind of, just a lot of noise or, smelly or whatever, although your smells are different here. So you want to have that in an area where it's not going to affect people's lives. But then they started losing, there was biotech companies and businesses like that that didn't need to be out there. And those are essentially white-collar jobs. They could have been in the downtown. And they realized there was an incentive for them to go out and do the cheap big box thing and put all their employees out there. But they were losing that spin economy. Those people were going to lunch. They were having meetings at bars and stuff like that. They'd have to drive into the downtown to do that. So they changed their attitude about that use in that location, that the industry was purely for the industry stuff, not for things that could be like a regular kind of job. So that's one change. Lancaster, California, doing the way that they're looking at their tax system differently. Can we unbundle our taxes and treat it like pay-as-you-go? So rather than just buying cable and just getting all the channels that come with it, if you're just watching ESPN, you pay for that. Why should everybody else have to pay for that? So they're unbundling their tax system, which is going to drive the way that things change. Architecturally, this is an example. Chattanooga, Tennessee. I'll go through the example and then I'll talk about the mistake. So here's downtown Chattanooga. Across the river, this is like the hipster area. It's like Brooklyn, and this is the downtown. This is the hot, trendy neighborhood. Over there, this developer proposed this grocery store in a surface parking lot. And so the community's like, well, that's great. That's not what our zoning code calls for or our comp plan. We wanted to have something more mixed use. We're growing up the area. The mayor was like, I don't care. I've got this developer from Atlanta. We got to get these jobs, 40 jobs. So the community wanted to know what the opportunity cost was of that. So we ran this simple analysis of here's the site, here's some mixed-use buildings, here's a local grocery store called Green Life. It's now Whole Foods bought it, but it's kind of like your local guy did that, and you have townhouses up here. So you have the ingredients of urban design. You have a guideline that wants urban design here, and you're getting a suburban box. So here's what the suburban box looks like. It's Publix is the brand. They have them in the marketplace. We could comp it. Here's office above retail, residential above retail, just down the street. We're not grabbing stuff from Chicago. This is your community. Here's the Green Life grocery store right there. So the grocery store is back here, and they glued on this liner building that's got like yoga studios up here and like retail on the ground floor, but there's really a grocery store behind it. And then Publix has done crazy stuff. This is Publix in Miami Beach. It has parking on the roof. This looks like a UFO hit it, but it's a conveyor belt to get the person with their groceries up to their car. So they've done hyper-urban in 1998. Publix has done a hybrid model, small footprint, in West Palm Beach, Florida, with a pedestrian entrance on the street. It's really the back of the store. And then on the front of the store is in the back, which is the parking lot for the cars. So everybody's happy. The cars are happy, the pedestrians are happy. Great. One of the things that drives me nuts, I'm trained as an architect. I sat on my planning board. I can't tell you how many times I've watched people look at drawings and they can't read them. There's 34 foot of grade change through this site. Let's go back for a second. There is a retaining wall in this image. Do you all see it? Through the whole site, that's a retaining wall, clearly labeled in 4-point font. I can't tell you how many meetings I sit in. Everybody looks at drawings and like, okay, yeah. They have no clue what they're agreeing to. So what we did is we went ahead and made it for them. So we made a little SketchUp model. It's really bad. I mean, I couldn't get the topo to go well. But here's, I wanted people to see that here's the housing that gets to look at a tarmac of a roof. And here's your 1/4 mile long future graffiti wall right here. But we're also running the taxes. I'll come back to the taxes in a second. So that's what the developer's offering you. If you just follow your own plans, this is what you wanted. Housing, facing housing. Go ahead and do your grocery store in the pit, and then a couple of mixed-use buildings in the corner, and then big parking in the center. That's your minimum. That's your 2-drink minimum in your zoning code, let's say. Now let's be creative. Let's hire an urban designer to do something special. So we'll do what the local guy did, the Green Life model. We'll throw it over here, a little bit of a liner building in the front, grocery store behind it, mix of uses around the edge, big parking in the center. This is what you get. Oh yeah, let's look at the county. So if we got the county to just kick in $100,000 a year for 10 years, $1 million, giving away $100,000 a year still nets them, was that $30,000 more than what they're getting with this one? They'd actually make money by giving it away. This is what you could have as a city. Now what's crazy is that's just the annual. As we've learned in this presentation, when you make this decision, you're stuck with it for a while. So these are actually the wrong numbers. Let's go ahead and net this forward 20 years. This is what we're talking about right here. 5 million versus 600,000. So what you're going to get out of this new growth is essentially $600,000 more than where you're in position right now. But you're going to forego millions of opportunity. Y'all can have a meeting right there at the meeting during the council hearing. You can say, let's just go ahead. I'm going to give you $2 million. You know, to work with Nate. Nate builds townhouses. I'll give you $2 million for your brain damage. Here you go. Throwing away $2 million, you've still made $2.2 million more than what they're bringing you. So it's like if you're already involved in this one way or another, how do you find ways to stimulate it? How do you find other opportunities to expand the pie? And in defense of the developer, this person just builds grocery stores. They don't build townhouses. So how do you make that happen? We already had one. We can just go around the room and see if there's anybody else. I'll come back to you. Anybody else?
Yeah, I've got one.
Sure.
I saw your presentation, and the data that you have is absolutely spectacular. I don't know how you do it. Nonetheless, I came away from this, and I'll grant you I'm hard of hearing. So maybe I missed the conclusion that I should take from your presentation for Northfield, because I believe fervently that Northfield's leadership for decades has looked at growth to save our bacon. 250 acres on the northwest corner is sort of evidence of that. Obviously, no one has filled that void. We still grow corn out there. So my question is, how do you answer the value of sustainability for Northfield as opposed to unbridled growth?
You know, I think maybe the takeaway would be, or my advice to you all, is operate with your eyes wide open about your data. You currently haven't developed it, so that's a good thing. You're just using corn out there. That's fine. But you have it now. It's part of your community, and it will be an opportunity for something. If I could snap my fingers and do something right now, I would start with the conversation with the college and see, because they're a big buffer around that area too, and to see what their plans are. And try to get actually both your colleges to synchronize their plans with your plans and make sure that they're efficient, but also try to help them with their needs too. They can't solve all the private sector concerns of the college students. The private sector is best for that. The pizza joint, the coffee shop, stuff like that. I was kind of surprised I didn't see more stuff closer toward the schools, like mini versions of downtowns versus the downtown part, which is a decision that you all made over time. But there was that one restaurant by St. Louis, which pretty obviously used to be a general store at one point in time. So there was a time in which the students would come downhill to get all of their stuff and go back uphill. But now it's kind of like been stunted with probably zoning, where you can't do those other uses nearby the college anymore. I don't know why, but that's your conversations. I would think about what's your current community burden, your infrastructure, your roads, the cost of pipe, all of that stuff. relative to your growth pattern. So I don't see the growth at all costs the same way that I see it in Faribault. Faribault seems to be expanding more of itself faster than you are, but it's not necessarily good long-term wealth. Your downtown is so much more potent than theirs, and you can see that in the model. So it's just, it's that genetic material of how much downtown can you handle. Can you put more downtown in it? I would go find a peer, find like a college town in Vermont or something like that that's not growing as fast. But you do have examples of places that you can seek out and learn from them that may be older than you are. So that helps. There's not one thing you can do. It's like when you go to your doctor doesn't tell you if you just have this one shoulder surgery, you're going to be awesome. That shoulder surgery is going to fix that problem, but you still have to exercise, you have to change your diet, you have to, there's like things you can do emotionally better with yourself, and it's that package of wellness and sustainability.
Thank you.
Over here and then over here.
So a lot of this talk has been about density. Here in Northfield, I don't think we're ever going to see an 8 to 10-story building in our town. So we're going to be talking 2 to 4 stories, which is the most challenging construction type to build for cost-wise with today's code, elevator circulation, everything else that goes into it. I also don't think in the short term we're going to change our tax code or how we're taxed on these properties. So I'm curious of what you've seen in these other communities as far as our market can't pay for those types of buildings right now. A 2-story building, a 3-story building is very challenging for us to build and make that numbers work in Northfield. So what incentives or programs have you seen go on in other communities that have encouraged this type of development to happen?
I see everything from free land, waiving permit fees. I wouldn't necessarily, I hear you, but I can see, with the hotel that you got now, it's more than 3 stories. It's those mixed-use buildings are more than 3 stories. You're getting those typologies in, but they're coming in as monoliths. So the question to you that I'd have is, why aren't they mixed up? Why isn't there other uses going on in those properties? Why aren't they blended in more with the downtown? They look like UFOs just dropped from there by the side of the roadway. I would also have a long, hard conversation with Minnesota DOT about 3 that comes through town, and what it feels like to walk up the hill to St. Olaf's. It's just, that's a barrier. You're allowing that infrastructure to be a river to separate part of your community from itself. That's a lost opportunity. So what comes in are little 1-story boxes with surface parking lots. Are there ways to marry entrepreneurs, people that start a brewery or a restaurant, with somebody that doesn't do that? So let's say you're just a housing developer, like I just do housing, that's all I do. I don't want the brain damage of dealing with retail. Could you package that? In Asheville, we did that with a developer where we were going to buy down all the retail space from a hotel developer. Like, you're a hotel developer, you don't understand that, we'll do it. And once we started nudging them into that conversation, they went ahead and took it. So it wasn't part of their business model. They've never done a hotel with retail on the ground floor, but we essentially used guilt. But we were ready to buy down a long-term lease on that and then bring the entrepreneurs in because we knew all the entrepreneurs. So I think there's lots of conversations you can have. It's going to take a developer coming a little bit out of their comfort level too. This is all I know how to do. And then also explaining what the cost of these things are. Why is there a break in 4 stories versus 5? Let's explain the cost of an elevator, the cost of fire sprinkling. A lot of people don't understand that. And if that's what your barrier is, take that opportunity to help educate the citizens on that as well. That yes, you're telling me I have to do 2 extra stories, but let me explain to you the market conditions and also what it's going to cost per unit to add an elevator. Now in Sheridan, Wyoming, they actually, I don't know if it ever happened, but one of the things we talked about was just going ahead and buying down the cost of the elevator to make it happen, to connect all these buildings to make sure that we could get around the fire code. Some communities just fire the fire official because they're being too draconian, but it depends. And somehow these buildings have been around since the 1800s, and it's not like they're spontaneously combusting because somebody's walking upstairs. Yet we've adopted fire codes that's made the stuff onerous. It's going to cost you $100,000 just to sprinkle one floor. But people need to know that. Does that make sense? Like close?
Yes.
So I'm on the school board, and I was wondering if you would comment on the role
talked about this yesterday. Schools are the third government. And sometimes, y'all aren't so bad, but there's a, we're talking with folks in Thomasville, Georgia, and the school board just went ahead and built this entire mega complex of school north of Thomasville, Georgia, right outside the city limits. The city had neighborhood schools. Kids could use this magic stuff called feet to get to the school. And the school board, by doing its efficiency plan, decided to just lump all their students together in one massive campus. Well, that took that ability of walking out of the system. So now all the kids have to be bused. They just bought down the transportation system with that decision. So the efficiencies that they thought they were gaining by making a campus, they went ahead and obliterated them with the buses. This is Salt Lake, Utah. The mayor for Salt Lake County, they have a strong mayor form of government, asked us to do a portfolio analysis of all municipally owned land. He's like, I don't care if it's city, county, school, university. So this is just a train line. This is Salt Lake up here. This is West Jordan. These are all different cities where you see these boundaries, but it's all within the county. So the blue stuff is all publicly owned land. Here's the university. Now you're going to talk to that developer about doing that stuff here, here, and here. Let's go crazy. Let's build an indoor, we'll make him build the indoor football field, and we'll put the running track on the roof. Let's go nuts. If we do that, that's a $406 million development, and you're keeping the high school. You know what that means to you? Taxes. That development would yield $2.5 million a year just in school taxes. It will then also yield city taxes and county taxes. Have you thought about this? You can actually cultivate your own wealth. Now you might be thinking, Joe, that's a little crazy. Well, it's actually going to be 2% of all property taxes that go to the entire school system out of the whole county. That's a pretty big bump. Now maybe that's too much. Maybe that's too big a development. But what about this thing? This just one parking lot that they use for what? Driver's education and like bus storage. In the middle of downtown. Is that really the highest and best use of that real estate? If we just did this stuff right there, that would yield a $30 million development. And y'all could actually just tell the developer, you know what, we need to have 30% of the housing needs to be our teachers. You could stipulate that. That's an opportunity. Well, the cost on the other side, so that's one way of looking at it. Let's go ahead and be honest with our community about the cost of that. Well, the cost of that is $128,000 a space. Let's go ahead and make sure everybody knows that's what it's costing society to maintain a surface parking lot for high school kids. It costs $129,000 a space. Now I'll tell you this as a developer, an underground parking space is going to cost you $40,000. Why would you pay 3 times that for surface parking? But again, I would argue do this for the school system as well and look at yourself the same way the city just looked at itself. Because you're in it together, and it actually helps for y'all to advocate them to do downtown development because it's going to yield more value as well. That's going to be more taxes that go to the school system. But also think about the infrastructure of getting the kids to and from that school in those neighborhoods. Those are anchor institutions. This is just like, you just use this like a thought puzzle. It's like, they're not going to do anything with it. It was more to like stimulate getting them out of the way that we've always done things attitude. Also, I have that kid's book scanned. If you want a copy of it, I'd love to get that thing republished. It's equal parts exciting and heartbreaking to know that we don't teach that. It was very informative.
I think a lot of what you said is collaboration between the city and schools. You know, we don't need to silo everything. School districts does not need to be school district only. They can work with the developers, they can work with the city, and it's like cross-training. You know, when somebody says something is sitting empty, they think about other use of that, something private ownership and use of facilities. So, this is just my opinion. How do you, this is all based on behavior. For the last 50 years, we all wanted big highways, big cars, without music, 20 minutes of drive time to work, and time warning, and all sorts. Now with the millennium of them, they want to kind of live more downtown. So how do you, is there anything like behavior-wise, how do you change human behavior so you get more benefit?
We were there last night. We weren't at the presentation last
No,
night.
I don't.
That's funny. So in 1973, this guy published this document, and look at the title, Cost of Sprawl. We knew about the cost of sprawl probably around the mid-60s, and yet we continued that behavior for another, we're still doing it. It's still happening. How is it we don't change our behavior when we have data? What I tell people is that, that suburban bias that we've baked in, and let's be honest, it's awesome to not have a neighbor. It's great. I let my dog run around, no one's going to tell me anything about my kids. I have this big yard. I've got all this infrastructure that you all pay for that I get to drive on every day. That's awesome. The system is subsidized in ways that we're not asking the right questions on. And it's driving so many other costs that, from a climate standpoint, we're just now starting to realize. But we have to unplug the financial system that's going to it. So when we talk about science, we talk about things like climate change or the physical realities of the environment. But what we miss is exactly what you just hit on, is the structure of our human behavior. This is a different kind of science up here. And there's two people that I recommend to people, is Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman are two psychologists that are the godfathers of behavioral science. They both won Nobel Prizes in economics, even though they're psychologists. And they have groundbreaking work that they did in the 1970s to figure out that we have two different brains. We have a thinky brain, a brain that we think is rational. That's the brain that we like to think that we are all the time. We're always rationally thinking things through. We're very smart people. But really there's an inner core brain that's more of our automatic stimulus response brain, which is kind of like our Homer Simpson brain. So we think that we're Dr. Spock, but the reality is we're Homer Simpson going after donuts. This is the reason why I still eat pizza and cheeseburgers. Even though I know my family's history, I'm going to do it because a cheeseburger is awesome. But what I'm going to do after that cheeseburger is I'm going to exercise, I'm going to eat some salad the next day, I'm going to all that stuff, right? I'm trying to keep a balance. So what we try to do is, there's actually this guy who won a Nobel Prize in economics. He's a professor at the University of Chicago. He shunned economics theory by saying we're not all perfect little econs operating in a model. We're humans. We're hairless apes. And he worked with Tversky and Kahneman. He wrote a book called Nudge. It talks about you want to nudge behavior along the way. This book is actually, this is his other book, Misbehaving. That's a more fun book to read. But don't put all the stress on yourselves to solve all the problems at once. You want to just kind of move along. What he refers to in his work is paternalistic libertarianism. And that's what I'm doing with you all right now. I honestly, I got my own community. I've got my own problems back at Asheville. And what I care that you all do is have information, and it's your choice what to do with it. Because I can't be here forever. So now that you're informed, what do you do with this? And that's the libertarian side of it. Paternalistically, I've given you information. You now have new data. So now what? You want to nudge things along. You can't just change all the behavior and pick up the highway and do things like that. Now you know where you're bleeding, and you find ways to fix it. You can still have your cheeseburger, but just not so often. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, one time I did some writing that if somebody, one or two people live in a 5,000 square feet house, and all the time I'm there, 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours, 14 or even some part, if you accumulate that time, I calculated that I can live in the 3 or 4 star hotel for about 15 days with the breakfast delivered to me within that.
Yeah.
Because I'm an efficient.
Yeah.
All heating, cooling, everything, bedding, all the things like that in the house. That inefficiency, I just most of the time to see.
But until you do the data, until you run the numbers.
Exactly. And you run the numbers, oh yeah, that's how much. giving out in our home.
The first time I did this presentation, I started with a quote from Mark Twain. And it said, "A person who won't read has no advantage over one who can't read." And I stood in front of the audience, a bunch of people that were into smart growth and sustainability, and I asked everybody, who's read your local tax policies? And no one raised their hand. And I said, look, we're all functionally illiterate about our taxation system because we're not reading it, we're not asking the questions. So until you run your data, until you do your math on your stuff, you can start to become informed and literate about where you're wasting your money or wasting opportunity. So that first thing is like an economic MRI. Do that three-dimensional model, see the money and the value, and then start asking the next series of questions. Anybody else? Are we good?
Good, thank you, Jim.
Actually, I'm staying at Sharon's Northfield Inn, and she and I were talking about taxation. Of course, I don't stop talking about taxation when I leave this room, but our chamber, so Asheville has 10 million tourists a year that come through town, and we have kind of a love-hate relationship with our tourism. But what I think that's kind of nice that our city does is they take the bed tax. So I'm paying taxes to your community through her inn, and they use that as a competitive grant process. So at the time, like when I did the math about a decade ago, they have 4 pennies of tax per dollar. 1 penny goes to the staff at the convention center or convention and visitors bureau. 2 pennies go to advertising Asheville more than a day's drive away from Asheville, which is kind of interesting. So imagine taking out ads in Minnesota or Minneapolis or St. Cloud or Duluth or whatever and saying, come visit Northfield or Chicago. The 4th penny is used for a competitive product internal to Asheville. So we as citizens of Asheville could actually compete for the bucket of revenues once a year to create fun things for people to do that come to visit. So if y'all come to visit Asheville and you do things like get on we have a comedy bus that's an architectural tour, so that guy that's eating fire is actually one of the best architectural tours in the city. But he got a grant from the tourism fund. So I know that there's some chamber folks in here. I would look at other communities that help enhance what you have here. You have a great quality of life here in a neat little town, so it'd be nice to tell more people about it. Okay.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks.
Again, thank you all for being here. We're going to have the video uploaded to the city website. Thank you again for coming. Have a great day.
Thanks.